Once upon a time, in a small village called Ugwani in the eastern part of Nigeria, there was a young woman named Oluchi. She was an orphan because her parents had died and left her all alone. Oluchi had a kind and loving husband named Nedu. Even though Nedu's parents didn't want him to marry Oluchi because she was from a poor background, Nedu still married her. They had two beautiful children, Afam and Ada. Their family was happy and Oluchi was thankful for Nedu's love and support. But one day, something bad happened. Nedu was walking up on a tall palm nut tree, trying to harvest nuts for their family. While he was cutting a bunch of nuts, he slipped and fell from the tree. Oluchi ran to him, but it was too late. Nedu had died. Oluchi was very sad and couldn't believe that her loving husband was gone. Now, she had to take care of Afam and Ada all by herself. Life became very hard for them. Oluchi's in-laws, who never liked her, saw this as a chance to make things worse for her. Chief Okoro, her father-in-law, started telling people that Oluchi had used witchcraft to cause Nedu's accident. He was angry and said he would punish her. Even Amma, her mother-in-law, joined in and made life difficult for Oluchi and her children. They would say mean things and make them feel unwelcome. As time went on, Oluchi found it harder to provide food and a safe place for her children to sleep. She went from house to house asking for help, but people turned her away. Some were even mean to her and her children. One night, things got even worse. Oluchi's in-laws decided they didn't want her and the children living in their family home anymore. They threw them out, leaving them to take care of themselves. It was a scary and sad time for Oluchi and her children. They didn't know where to go or what to do. As they wandered the streets of Ugwani, Oluchi held tightly to her children, Afam and Ada. Their eyes were filled with fear and uncertainty. They had nowhere to go and no one to help them. Oluchi tried to be strong, but inside, she was very sad and worried. Every house they went to for help shut the door in their faces. The villagers, influenced by Chief Okoro and Oma's cruel words, believed the lies and turned their backs on Oluchi and her children. It felt like a dark cloud was following them everywhere they went. One night, when hope seemed lost, a kind woman named Mrs. Ofo saw Oluchi and her children huddled together in the cold. Mrs. Ofo felt sorry for them and invited them into her small home. She gave them warm food and a place to sleep, hoping to give them some peace. But their peace did not last long. Chief Okoro and Oma found out where Oluchi and her children were staying. They went to Mrs. Ofo's house, accusing her of helping a witch. They threatened to bring bad luck to Mrs. Ofo and her family if she continued to help Oluchi. Scared by the threats, Mrs. Ofo tearfully asked Oluchi and her children to leave. Oluchi's heart broke as she saw the sadness on her children's faces. They had hoped for a safe place, only to have it taken away again. Back on the cold street, Oluchi hugged her children close, trying to keep them safe from the harsh reality. They were hungry and tired. They found a quiet corner to rest for the night, their tears mixing with the cold rain. Days turned into weeks, and Oluchi's struggles became harder. The villagers' minds were poisoned by her in-laws' lies. They accused her of stealing and even said she had caused her own children. The once friendly faces in the village now turned away in fear and suspicion whenever Oluchi and her children came near. Hope began to fade from Oluchi's heart. She felt trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The joy that once filled her children's faces was replaced by constant worry and sadness. Afam, who used to run around with lots of energy, now stayed close to his mother, his eyes wide with fear. Ada, who loved to sing and dance, now barely spoke and moved slowly, which broke Oluchi's heart. But through it all, Oluchi was determined to protect her children and give them a better life. She knew she had to be strong for them, even when her own strength was fading. As the days passed, Afam grew weaker. His lively eyes became dull, and his laughter turned into quiet moans of pain. Oluchi could feel her son slipping away, and it broke her heart. Afam was sick because of hunger and lack of proper care. Oluchi tried everything she could to find food and medicine for him. She knocked on doors, begged in the market, and even searched the forest for roots and fruits. But each time, she faced rejection or disappointment. The lies from her in-laws, Chief Okoro and Amma, haunted her every step. They had spread terrible stories about her, and the villagers believed them. No one wanted to help Oluchi and her children. One night, as Afam's cries grew weaker, Oluchi held him close, tears streaming down her face. Ada clung to her mother, pleading for her brother's life. "Mother, please save my brother," Ada begged, her voice trembling with fear and sadness. Oluchi hugged Ada tightly, trying to find strength in her embrace. She felt alone and helpless, abandoned by everyone except her children. She thought of her husband, Nedu, who had passed away, leaving them to fend for themselves. She wondered if he knew what his family was doing to her, if he could see their suffering. But Oluchi knew she couldn't rely on anyone else to save her children. She had to find a way herself, no matter how hopeless it seemed. That night, as the cold wind blew through their makeshift shelter, Oluchi made a silent promise to Afam. She promised him that she would not give up, that she would find a way to save him and Ada. She held on to that promise like a lifeline, hoping against all odds that she could keep it. Oluchi held her son Afam's lifeless body close, her heart breaking into million pieces. She rocked him gently, tears streaming down her face, while Ada cried on her shoulder, begging her mother to save her brother. As the night wore on, Afam's cries grew weaker, his body trembling with each faint breath. Oluchi's mind raced with fear and desperation, desperately seeking for a solution. But despite her efforts, it was too late. Afam took his last breath with a soft gasp, leaving Oluchi clutching his lifeless form. Oluchi's world shattered. She couldn't believe her beloved son was gone. Her wails of grief echoed through the desolate streets, mixing with Ada's heartbreaking screams of pain and sorrow. Word of Afam's death spread quickly through the village. Chief Okoro and Amma, Oluchi's in-laws, heard the news. Instead of offering comfort, they saw it as another opportunity to torment Oluchi. They arrived at the unfinished building where Oluchi and Ada were staying, their faces twisted with malice. "You've done it again, Oluchi," Chief Okoro spat with contempt. "First your husband, now your son. You are a curse to our family." Oma's eyes burned with hatred as she added, "You've proven yourself to be a wicked mother, Oluchi. You've killed your own son." Oluchi felt their accusation cut deep into her already shattered heart. For a moment, her grief and pain were overshadowed by their cruelty. But deep within her, a fierce determination began to rise. She couldn't let their venom consume her. "I did not kill my son." Oluchi's voice rang out through the night, filled with defiance. "Your cruelty and hatred are what killed him. You've taken away his chance at life, and now he is gone." Chief Okoro and Amma were momentarily stunned by Oluchi's boldness. They exchanged looks of surprise and shame, realizing the weight of their words and actions. With their heads bowed in shame, they left the place, their tongues silenced for the moment. As days turned into weeks, Oluchi found herself shunned by the villagers. They whispered and avoided her, believing the lies spread by Chief Okoro and Amma, his wife. Her name became a curse, and her heart ached with loneliness and despair. Only Ada's presence brought her some comfort. But even her daughter's innocent love couldn't ease the deep pain within Oluchi's heart. One day, as they sat together in their small shack, Ada holding her mother's hand tightly, Oluchi knew she had to find a way to clear her name and prove her innocence. But the challenge seemed overwhelming against the power and influence of Chief Okoro and Amma. Yet, a fire ignited within Oluchi, a determination to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for her children and the truth. She vowed silently to herself that she would not let the injustice prevail, no matter the obstacle ahead. As time passed, Oluchi and Ada had been staying in an unfinished building since they had nowhere else to go. The walls were bare, and there was no roof to keep out the rain, but it was better than nothing. Oluchi tried to make it a home for her daughter, doing her best to keep her safe and warm. One day, as they were sitting together, the owner of the unfinished building came. His name was Mr. Ade. He looked angry and very impatient. When he saw Oluchi and Ada, his face hardened even more. "You cannot stay here," Mr. Ade said firmly. "This is my property, and I need to finish this building. You have to leave, madam." Oluchi's heart sank. "Please, sir," she begged. "We have nowhere else to go. Just give us a little time, just a little more time. Please, sir." But Mr. Ade shook his head. "I am sorry. You must go, madam. I can't let you have here." With a heavy heart, Oluchi gathered their few belongings. Ada held her mother's hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. They had no choice but to leave. As they walked away, Oluchi felt more lost and desperate than ever. Days turned into weeks, and life grew even harder for Oluchi and Ada. One morning, as they were trying to find a place to rest, two men approached them. They were messengers from Chief Okoro, her father-in-law. "Oluchi," one of the men said, "Chief Okoro has summoned you before the chief council. You must come with us." Oluchi's heart pounded with fear. She knew this was not going to be good. Holding Ada close, she followed the men to the village square, where the chief council met. When they arrived, Chief Okoro was already there, his face twisted with anger. The other elders of the village sat in a circle, looking serious and stern. The villagers gathered around, curious to see what would happen. "Oluchi," Chief Okoro began loudly, "you are here because you have committed a terrible crime. You have killed my son, Nedu, and now my grandson, Afam. You are a curse to our family." Oluchi felt her knees go weak, but she stood tall, holding Ada's hand tightly. "I did not kill them," she said, her voice steady. "Nedu's death was an accident, and Afam died because we had no food or shelter. It was not my fault." Chief Okoro's eyes blazed with fury. "Lies!" he shouted. "You are a wicked woman, and you must be punished." The chief council listened carefully. One of the elders, Elder Obi, spoke up. "We need to hear both sides," he said. "Oluchi, tell us your story." With tears in her eyes, Oluchi told them everything. She spoke about Nedu's accident, how she tried to care for her children after his death, and how Chief Okoro and Amma her mother-in-law had made their lives miserable. She explained how they had been thrown out, shunned by the village, and now Afam had died because of their hardship. The villagers listened in silence. Some of them began to see the pain in Oluchi's eyes and the truth in her words. But Chief Okoro was not done. She is lying to save herself. He insisted she must be punished for her crimes. Maazi Obi and the other council members exchanged glances. They knew they had a difficult decision to make. The truth was not clear, and they needed time to think. Oluchi, Maazi Obi said finally, "We will consider your words and the accusation against you. You may go for now, but we will call you back when we had made our decisions." With that, Oluchi and Ada were allowed to leave, but the weight of the accusations hung heavily over them. They had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. As they walked away from the village square, Oluchi felt lost and confused than ever. Oluchi and Ada walked aimlessly through the village, their hearts heavy with worry and fear. The villagers' whispers follows them everywhere, and the accusations from Chief Okoro weighed heavily on Oluchi's mind. They had nowhere to go, and Oluchi knew she had to find shelter soon. As they walked, Oluchi remembered her father's old thatch hut on the outskirts of the village. As her parents passed away and she got married, the house had been abandoned. The thatch was worn out and the walls were crumbling, but it was the only place they could go to avoid further embarrassment and find some peace. "Come, Ada," Oluchi said gently, taking her daughter's hands. "We will go to your grandfather's old hut. It's not much, but it will give us a roof over our heads." Ada nodded, trusting her mother completely. They made their way to the hut, walking through overgrown paths and fields. When they finally arrived, Oluchi's heart sank. The hut was in worse condition than she remembered. The roof was full of holes and the walls looked like they could collapse at any time. But Oluchi was determined. She and Ada cleaned the small space, sweeping out dirt and debris. They patched the holes in the thatch roof as best as they could with palm leaves and other materials they found nearby. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. "We will make it work," Oluchi told Ada with a reassuring smile. "We are strong and we will get through this together." Ada hugged her mother tightly. "I believe you, Mama." While Oluchi and Ada tried to make the hut livable, Chief Okoro was plotting. He was furious that Oluchi had not been punished and was determined to make her suffer. His mind was filled with thoughts of revenge. "I must bring her down." Maazi Okoro muttered to himself. "My son's death will not go unpunished." Determined to get his way, Chief Okoro visited a native doctor, a man known for his powerful charms and dark magic. The native doctor's hut was filled with strange objects and a smoky haze from burning herbs. Maazi Okoro explained his desire to ruin Oluchi, and the native doctor listened carefully. "You want to harm her?" the native doctor asked, his eyes glinting with interest. "Yes," Maazi Okoro replied. "I want her to suffer. She must pay for what she has done." The native doctor nodded slowly. "I can give you a charm that will bring her misery, but be warned, such magic comes at a cost." Maazi Okoro didn't hesitate. "I don't care about the cost. Just give me the charm." The native doctor prepared a small dark object and handed it to Chief Okoro. "Take this," he instructed. "Bury it near her home, and her life will be filled with misfortune and sorrow." Chief Okoro took the charm, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Thank you," he said, already planning how to use it against Oluchi. Back at the old hut, Oluchi and Ada were trying to make the best of their situation. They were grateful to have a place to stay, even if it wasn't much. Oluchi knew she had to find a way to support them, so she began looking for work in the village. But with Chief Okoro's accusations hanging over her, it was difficult. The villagers were wary of her and many refused to help her. One evening, as Oluchi and Ada sat in their small home, Ada looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Mama, will we ever be happy again?" Oluchi hugged her daughter tightly. "Yes, Ada, we will find happiness again. We just have to be strong and keep believing in ourselves." Mazi Okoro was determined to make Oluchi suffer. He wanted revenge for the death of his son, and he was willing to go to any length to achieve it. He had people keeping a close eye on Oluchi, so he knew exactly where she and Ada were living. One night, when the moon was high and the village was quiet, Mazi Okoro made his move. He carried the dark charm given to him by the native doctor and crept towards the old thatch hut where Oluchi and Ada were staying. His heart was filled with malice and anger. When he reached the hut, he carefully dug a small hole near the entrance and buried the charm. Muttering dark words under his breath, he covered the hole and smoothed the earth, making sure no one would see what he had done. Satisfied, he sneaked back to his house, feeling a cruel sense of satisfaction. This will teach her a lesson. He thought, she will pay for what she did to my son. The next day, Mazi Okoro went to the village elders. He was still angry that Oluchi had not been punished and was determined to remind them that justice had not been served. "My son still hasn't gotten the justice he deserves," Mazi Okoro told the elders, his voice filled with emotion. "Oluchi must be made to answer for her actions." The elders listened carefully. They knew that the accusations against Oluchi were serious and they needed to find a way to resolve the matter. Mazi Obi, who was the wisest man among them, spoke up. "We will invite Oluchi again and give her a chance to prove her innocence. If she is truly innocent, she will not fear taking an oath." The other elders nodded in agreement. They sent a messenger to call Oluchi to the village square one more time. When Oluchi and Ada arrived, the village square was filled with curious villagers. The tension was palpable and everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Mazi Obi stood and addressed Oluchi. "Oluchi, you are accused of causing the deaths of your husband and son. To prove your innocence, you must swear an oath before the gods. Do you accept this challenge?" Oluchi looked at Mazi Obi with calm determination. She knew she was innocent and had nothing to fear. "I accept," she said firmly. "I will swear the oath to prove my innocence." Ada held her mother's hand slightly, trusting her completely. Oluchi's heart swelled with love and protectiveness for her daughter. Mazi Okoro watched from the crowd, a sinister smile on his face. He was confident that the charm he had buried would work against Oluchi, and he eagerly awaited the moment when she would be punished. The elders prepared the sacred items for the oath. They placed a calabash of water and a small statue of the village deity in front of Oluchi. Mazi Obi handed Oluchi a small piece of kola nut. "You must chew this kola nut and swear that you did not cause the deaths of your husband and son," Mazi Obi instructed. "If you are lying, the gods will punish you." Oluchi took the kola nut, her hand steady. She chewed it slowly, then swallowed. She raised her hand and spoke clearly. "I swear before the gods and all the people of the village that I did not cause the deaths of my husband Nedu or my son Afam. I am innocent. The villagers watched in silence, holding their breath. They knew that swearing a false oath could bring terrible consequences. Suddenly, a strong wind blew through the village square, and the trees rustled loudly. The villagers gasped, fearing that the gods were angry. But the wind quickly died down, and everything returned to normal. Maziobi nodded solemnly. The gods have heard your oath, Oluchi. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear. Oluchi felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had spoken the truth, and she hoped that the gods would protect her. But she was unaware of the dark charm that Mazi Okoro, her father-in-law, had buried near her home, and the trouble it might bring. The villagers began to disperse, murmuring amongst themselves. Some believed Oluchi's innocence, while others were still suspicious. Mazi Okoro, however, was not satisfied. He returned home, plotting his next move. Oluchi and Ada went back to their small hut, grateful for the moment of peace. But the dark charm buried near their home began to take effect. Strange things started happening. Ada became ill, and their few belongings began to break or disappear. Oluchi's heart ached with worry, but she refused to give up. We will get through this, Ada, she told her daughter, holding her close. We are strong and will find a way to overcome these hardships. But as days passed, the challenges grew harder, and Oluchi realized that she needed help. She had to uncover the truth about the strange events and find a way to protect herself and her daughter Ada from the dark forces working against them. Oluchi watched over Ada with worried eyes. Ada had become ill, and Oluchi knew she had to do something to save her daughter. She gathered some herbs she knew could help and prepared a special mixture. With gentle hands, she administered the herbs to Ada, praying for her recovery. I will not lose you like I lost Afam, Oluchi whispered to herself, determined to save her daughter. Days passed, and slowly Ada began to get better. Her strength returned, and her cheeks regained some color. Oluchi was relieved and grateful. She hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you, Mama, Ada said weakly. I feel better now. Oluchi smiled, though her heart was still heavy. She knew their struggles were far from over, but for now she was thankful that Ada, her daughter, was recovering. Weeks went by, and Ada grew stronger. She played around their small hut, her laughter bringing a glimmer of hope to Oluchi's heart. But just as things seemed to be looking up, Oluchi was struck down with a terrible illness. Painful sores appeared all over her body, and she was unable to move without agony. Mama, what is happening? Ada cried out, tears streaming down her face. She was so confused and didn't know how to help her mother. Oluchi winced in pain but tried to comfort her daughter. It's okay, Ada. I will be fine. We will get through this. Ada remembered the herbs her mother had used on her when she was sick. She thought maybe they could help her mother too. She ran to gather the herbs and prepared the mixture just as the mother had shown her. She gently applied the herbs to Oluchi's sores, but to her dismay, they didn't help. Oluchi's pains only seemed to worsen. Mama, why isn't it working? Ada sobbed. What can I do? Oluchi's heart broke at the sight of her daughter's distress. She wanted to reassure her, but the pain was too intense. She felt helpless and scared, knowing that there was no one to turn to for help. Ada, listen to me, Oluchi said weakly. You are strong, and we will get through this together. Just stay with me, and we'll find a way. Days turned into weeks, and Ada stayed by her mother's side. doing her best to care for her. But Oluchi's condition continued to worsen. The sores spread, and the pain became unbearable. Oluchi cried out in agony, and Avda felt her heart breaking. One day, as the sun set and cast a golden glow over the village, Ada made a decision. She knew she couldn't let her mother suffer alone. She had to find help, even if it meant facing the villagers who had turned their backs on them. Mama, I'm going to find help, Ada said firmly, wiping her tears. I will bring someone to help you. Oluchi nodded weakly, too tired to argue. She watched as her brave daughter ran out of the hut, her small figure determined and strong. As Ada ran through the village, knocking on doors and begging for help. But most of the villagers were afraid to get involved, fearing the wrath of Chief Okoro. Ada's plea fell on deaf ears, and she felt more desperate with each rejection. Please, someone help us, Ada cried, her voice breaking. Just as Ada was about to give up, she remembered Mrs. Ofo, the kind woman who had once offered them shelter. Ada ran to Mrs. Ofo's home, her heart pounding with hope. Mrs. Ofo, please help us, Ada begged, tears streaming down her face. My mother is very sick, and I don't know what to do. Mrs. Ofo looked at Ada with sympathy and concern. She knew how much Oluchi had suffered and couldn't turn away from a child in need. She gently took Ada's hand and led her back to the hut. When they arrived, Mrs. Ofo was shocked by Oluchi's condition. She quickly set to work, using her knowledge of herbs and remedies to try and ease Oluchi's pain. She stayed with them throughout the night, doing everything she could to help. Oluchi's pain began to lessen, and she managed a weak smile at Mrs. Ofo. Thank you, she whispered, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Mrs. Ofo nodded, her heart heavy with concern. We will take it one day at a time, Oluchi. You are not alone. Ada hugged her mother tightly, feeling a glimmer of hope once again, but they both knew that the road ahead would be challenging. Chief Okoro's dark magic and the villagers' suspicion still loomed over them. Oluchi and Ada would need all their strength and courage to face the battle ahead. Mr. Okoro was determined to see Oluchi suffer. When he heard about her worsening condition, he set off an alarm, eager to inform the village elders that the oath Oluchi had taken was now manifesting its effects. He went to the elders with urgency in his voice. The gods have shown their judgment, he declared. Oluchi is covered in sores, and her condition is dreadful. It is clear that her oath was false. The elders were troubled by this news. Mazi Obi, the wisest among them, decided that they needed to confirm Okoro's report. They gathered some of the village youths and headed towards Oluchi's hut. As they approached the old thatch hut, they could hear Ada's quiet sobs and Oluchi's faint groans of pain. The sight that greeted them was heart-wrenching. Oluchi lay weak and covered in sores, her body trembling with pain. Ada sat beside her, holding her mother's hands, her young face etched with worry and fear. Mazi Obi and the other elders stood in silence, taking in the pitiable condition of Oluchi. The youths who had accompanied them exchanged uneasy glances, feeling sorry for the suffering family. Mazi Obi, what should we do? One of the youths asked softly. Mazi Obi sighed deeply. We leave her to the gods. If this is their will, then we must let it be. Let the gods finish what they have started. Mazi Okoro was disappointed. He had hoped that the elders would banish Oluchi from the village, but now they were leaving her fate to the gods. He tried to hide his frustration and nodded in agreement. As you wish, elders, Okoro said, masking his disappointment. The gods will see justice done. The group left Oluchi's hut, leaving her and Ada alone once more. Mazi Okoro consoled himself with the thought that Oluchi would not survive what he had planted around the house. Even if she escaped banishment, she wouldn't escape the dark charm he had buried. She won't survive what awaits her. Okoro muttered to himself. My charm will ensure that. Back at the hut, Mrs. Ofo continued to care for Oluchi and Ada. She refused to abandon them, despite the villagers' growing suspicions and fear. She knew that Oluchi was a good woman who didn't deserve this suffering. We will get through this, Mrs. Ofo said to Oluchi, her voice filled with determination. I won't let you suffer alone. Ada clung to her mother, tears streaming down her face. Mama, please get better. I need you. Oluchi managed a weak smile, her eyes filled with love for her daughter. I will try, Ada. I will try. As the days passed, Oluchi's condition showed little improvement. The sores continued to cause her immense pain, and she grew weaker with each passing day. Mrs. Ofo did everything she could, but the dark charm's influence was strong. Mr. Okoro watched from a distance, satisfied with the suffering he had inflicted. He believed that his plan was working perfectly, but he never knew his cruel actions were sowing seeds of doubt and fear among the villagers. Some began to question the fairness of leaving Oluchi and Ada to suffer without help. One evening, as the sun set and cast a warm glow over the village, a small group of villagers gathered near the elders' meeting. They spoke in hushed tones, their faces filled with concern. Maziobi, we cannot ignore what is happening to Oluchi. One of them said, we must help her. It is not right to let her suffer like this. Maziobi listened carefully. He knew that the situation was complex and that they had to tread carefully, but he also felt a growing unease about Mazi Okoro's relentless pursuit of vengeance. We will find a way to help Oluchi, Maziobi said finally, but we must be cautious and respectful of the God's will. The villagers nodded in agreement, feeling a glimmer of hope. They knew that helping Oluchi would not be easy, but they were determined to do what was right. Meanwhile, Oluchi lay in her hut, her body weak, but her spirit unbroken. She held Ada's hand, drawing strength from her daughter's love. Despite the pain, she refused to give up. We will get through this, Ada, Oluchi whispered. We are strong and will find a way. Days turned into weeks, and Oluchi continued to suffer from the terrible sores covering her body. The pain was unbearable, and she had felt weaker each day. Mrs. Ofo hadn't visited in a while, and Oluchi knew they needed help desperately. Ada, my dear, Oluchi said weakly one morning, we need to go to the road and ask for help from passerby. Maybe somebody will take pity on us. Ada nodded, her eyes filled with worry but also determination. Yes, Mama, let's go. With great efforts, Oluchi managed to get up, leaning heavily on Ada for support. They slowly made their way to the village road, hoping someone would stop and help them. As they walked, they saw a man approaching from a distance. When he got closer, Oluchi recognized him. It was Ejike, her husband's best friend. Ejike almost didn't recognize Oluchi because of her frail and sickly appearance. He stopped in his tracks, his eyes wide with shock and concern. Oluchi, is that you? Ejike asked, his voice full of surprise. Oluchi nodded weakly. Yes, Ejike, it is me. Ejike walked up to her, his face filled with worry. What happened to you? Why do you look like this? Where have you been? It's a long story, Oluchi replied, her voice trembling. After Nedu's death, my in-laws threw me out. We've been struggling ever since then. Ejike's heart sank As he listened to Oluchi's story, he had heard about her in-laws' cruelty but didn't know she was still in the village. I didn't know you were still here. I've been looking for you. Oluchi managed a weak smile. We've been hiding, trying to survive. Ejike looked at Ada, who was holding her mother's hand tightly. And who is this brave girl? He asked gently. This is my daughter Ada, Oluchi said, her voice filled with pride. Ejike knelt down to Ada's level and smiled at her. Hello Ada, you are very brave to take care of your mother like this. Ada nodded shyly, clinging to her mother's hand. Thank you, sir. Ejike stood up and looked at Oluchi. Where were you going? We were going to the road to ask for help. Oluchi replied, we don't have any food or money. Ejike's heart aches for them. Come with me. I will take you back home and help you. He gently guided them back to their small hut. Once they were inside, Ejike reached into his pocket and pulled out some money. He handed it over to Oluchi. Here, take this, he said. It will help you buy some food and medicine. Oluchi's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Thank you, Ejike. You are very kind. Ejike smiled warmly. It's the least I could do. Nedu was my best friend, and I won't abandon his family. I promise to check on you regularly and help in any way I can. Ada hugged her mother tightly, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in a long while. Thank you, sir, she said softly. Ejike stayed with them for a while, listening to Oluchi's story and offering words of comfort. Before he left, he made sure they had everything they needed for the time being. Take care, Oluchi. I will be back soon, Ejike promised as he left. Oluchi watched him go, feeling a sense of relief and gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. She knew they still had a long way to go, but with Ejike's help, they had a chance to survive. Oluchi and Ada's spirits were lifted after Ejike's visit. The money he left allowed them to buy some food and medicine. Slowly, Oluchi's condition began to improve. Ada took on more responsibilities, fetching water and helping her mother as much as she could. One sunny afternoon, as Oluchi rested in the shade of their hut, Ada came running towards her face bright with excitement. Mama, Mama, look who is here, she shouted. Oluchi looked up and saw Ejike approaching, carrying a basket full of food and supplies. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Ejike, you came back, Oluchi said, her voice filled with relief. I promised I would, Ejike replied with a warm smile. He placed the basket on the ground and began unpacking its contents. Rice, beans, yam and some vegetables and a few basic medicines. I bought some more food and medicine. I also spoke to a doctor in the neighboring village. He has agreed to come and check on you, Ejike explained. Oluchi's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Ejike. I don't know how to repay you. You don't need to repay me. I'm just doing what Nedu have wanted, Ejike said softly. As they sat and talked, Ejike shared stories about Nedu, bringing smiles to Oluchi and Ada's faces. It was a bittersweet comfort, but it helped to keep Nedu's memory alive. Later that evening, the doctor Ejike had spoken about arrived. He examined Oluchi thoroughly, cleaned her sores, and gave her some more effective medicine. You need rest and proper nutrition, the doctor advised. With time, you will recover. Thank you, doctor, Oluchi said, feeling a glimmer of hope. Days turned into weeks, and with Ejike's continued support, Oluchi's health steadily improved. Ada was happier, seeing her mother regain her strength. However, Mazi Okoro had not given up on his plans. He learned about Ejike's involvement and grew furious. How dare he interfere? Okoro fumed. I will not let him ruin my plans. Okoro decided to take drastic measures. He went back to the elders, insisting that Oluchi needed to be banished immediately. He painted Ejike's help as an act of rebellion against the village's customs. The gods are angry of her presence, Okoro claimed. We must act now before it is too late. The elders were torn. Mazi Obi, who had always been cautious, felt a deep unease about Okoro's relentless pursuit of Oluchi. He decided to speak privately with Ejike to understand the situation better. Mazi Obi, Ejike greeted respectfully. I know why you are here. Ejike, tell me, why are you helping Oluchi? Mazi Obi asked. I am helping her because she is innocent. Ejike replied firmly. Nedu was my best friend, and I cannot stand by and watch his family suffer unjustly. Mazi Obi nodded, sensing the sincerity in Ejike's words. I have always doubted Okoro's intentions. His hatred is consuming him. Oluchi deserves a chance to live peacefully. Ejike said, I beg you, Mazi Obi, help her. Mazi Obi pondered deeply. He decided to confront Okoro directly. Okoro, Mazi Obi said sternly, your actions are driven by vengeance, not justice. The gods do not demand such cruelty. You dare question me? Okoro spat. The gods have spoken. No, Okoro, it is your hatred speaking. Mazi Obi retorted. We will not punish Oluchi. Instead, we will seek the truth. The village elders, led by Mazi Obi, decided to reinvestigate the circumstances of Nedu's death and Oluchi's suffering. They wanted to ensure that justice, not vengeance, prevailed. In the meantime, Ejike continued to support Oluchi and Ada, determined to see them through this ordeal. Oluchi, now more hopeful than ever, prayed that the truth would finally come to light. The sun was shining brightly as Ada walked in their small compound, weeding the grass that had grown tall around their huts. The grass had become a problem, covering the area and making it difficult for them to move around freely. As Ada walked by the side of the hut, her hoe suddenly struck something hard. Curious, she knelt down and began to dig with her hands. Brushing away the soil, her eyes widened as she uncovered a black object tied with red pieces of cloth. Her heart pondered as she saw the name Oluchi written on it. Mama, Mama, Ada shouted, her voice filled with fear and urgency. Oluchi, who had been resting inside, heard her daughter's cries and struggled to her feet despite her weakness. She hurried outside to see what had happened. Ada, what is wrong? Oluchi asked, her voice trembling. Mama, look at this. Ada pointed to the strange object she had unearthed. Oluchi's eyes widened in horror as she saw what Ada was holding. The sight of the black object, tied with red pieces of cloth and bearing her name, made her feel faint. She staggered backward, her hand clutching her chest. Who could have done this? Oluchi cried out, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over her. Ada, still holding the object, looked at her mother with wide, fearful eyes. Mama, what is it? What does it mean? Oluchi took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. It's a charm, Ada. Someone buried it here to bring us harm. But why, Mama? Why would someone do this to us? Ada asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, my dear, Oluchi replied, tears streaming down her face. But we must get rid of it. Oluchi took the object from Ada and placed it on the ground. She felt a surge of determination. She wouldn't let this curse defeat her. She had to find a way to protect her daughter and herself. We need to find someone who can help us, Oluchi said. Someone who knows about these things. But who, Mama? Who will help us? Ada asked, her eyes filled with worry. Ejike, Oluchi said firmly. He has been a good friend to us. Maybe he knows someone who can help us. Later that day, Oluchi and Ada set out to find Ejike. They walked slowly, Oluchi still weak but determined. When they reached Ejike's house, he welcomed them warmly. Oluchi, Ada, come in, Ejike said. What brings you here? Oluchi explained everything to Ejike, showing him the cursed object Ada had found. Ejike's face grew serious as he examined it. This is very troubling, Ejike said. But I know someone who might be able to help. There is an old woman in the neighboring village. She knows about these things. We can go to her. Oluchi nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. Thank you, Ejike. I don't know what I would have done without you. Ejike smiled gently. Let's go now. The sooner we get rid of this, the better. They set off to the neighboring village, walking as quickly as Oluchi's condition allowed. When they arrived, Ejike led them to a small hut at the edge of the village. An elderly woman with kind eyes and a wise demeanor greeted them. Welcome, she said. How can I help you? Ejike explained their situation, showing her the cursed object. The old woman nodded thoughtfully. This is indeed a powerful curse, she said, but don't worry, we can remove it. The old woman performed a ritual to cleanse the curse, burning the object and chanting prayers. Oluchi and Ada watched with bated breath, praying that this would finally bring them some peace. When the ritual was completed, the old woman smiled at them. The curse is lifted. You are safe now. Oluchi felt a wave of relief wash over her. Thank you, she said, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Take care of each other, the old woman said, and remember, love and kindness will always overcome hatred and evil. Back in the village, Okoro was starting to feel the effect of his own evil actions. He had planted a charm to harm Oluchi, but the curse began to backfire on him. He started experiencing strange pains and nightmares that kept him awake at night. His health began to deteriorate rapidly, and his mind was filled with guilt and fear. One day, as he sat alone in his compound, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. He knew that the curse he had intended for Oluchi was now affecting him. Desperation and fear gripped him as he realized the gravity of his actions. Okoro decided that he couldn't keep the truth hidden any longer. He knew he had to confess to the elders and seek forgiveness. His hatred for Oluchi had driven him to do terrible things, and now he was paying for the price. With a heavy heart, Okoro went to the village square where the elders often gathered. He could barely walk due to his condition, but he forced himself to move forward. When he reached the elders, they looked at him with concern, seeing the change in his appearance. Elders, I have something to confess, Okoro began, his voice trembling. I have wronged Oluchi in the most terrible way. I planted a charm to harm her because of my hatred. I blamed her for my son's death, but Nidu died a natural death. The elders were shocked by his confession. They had suspected something was wrong, but hearing it directly from Okoro was startling. They gathered around him, their faces a mixture of anger and disappointment. Why did you do this, Okoro? One of the elders asked. Why did you let your hatred consume you? Okoro bowed his head, tears streaming down his face. I was blinded by my anger and grief. I couldn't accept that my son was gone. I wanted someone to blame, and Oluchi was an easy target. But now, I see the error on my ways. The curse had backfired on me, and I am suffering. One of the elders, an old man with a kind face, spoke up. Okoro, your actions have caused you great harm to Oluchi and her daughter. You must seek for forgiveness and make amends for what you have done. As Okoro nodded, his body shaking with sobs. I will do whatever it takes to make things right. The elders decided to summon Oluchi to the village square. When she arrived with her daughter Ada, they saw the pain and suffering that she had endured. Her face was pale and she looked weak, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Oluchi, the old man said gently, Mazi Okoro has confessed to his wrongdoings. He has admitted to planting the charm and falsely accusing you. He seeks your forgiveness. Oluchi looked at Mazi Okoro, who was now kneeling before her, his eyes filled with regret. She felt mix of emotions, anger, sorrow, and relief. But deep down, she knew that holding on to hatred would only bring more pain. Mr. Okoro, Oluchi began, her voice steady but soft. You have caused me and my daughter so much suffering, but I cannot carry this burden of hatred any longer. I forgive you, not because of what you did was right, but because I want to move forward and find peace. Mr. Okoro sobbed uncontrollably, grateful for her forgiveness. Thank you, Oluchi. I will do everything in my power to help you and Ada from now on. I promise to make amends for my actions. Oluchi shook her head gently. Mr. Okoro, I do not need anything from you. My forgiveness is enough. Use this chance to change and become a better person. The elders nodded in approval, seeing the beginning of a new chapter for both Oluchi and Mr. Okoro. They knew that forgiveness was the first step towards healing and rebuilding trust in the community. However, the elders also decided that Mr. Okoro must be banished from the village for his atrocities. Okoro, your actions have caused great harm. As a consequence, you will be banished from this village, the old man announced solemnly. Mr. Okoro accepted his fate with a bowed head. The next day, the village gathered to witness Okoro's departure. He packed his belongings and, with a heavy heart, walked out of the village he had called home. The villagers watched him in silence, understanding the seriousness of his punishment. Slowly, the villagers began to see Oluchi in a new light. They realized that she was not the cause of their misfortunes, but a victim of unjust hatred. They started to offer their support and kindness, helping her rebuild her life. Oluchi felt a sense of relief and gratitude. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer alone. With Ada by her side and the support of the villagers, she felt hopeful for the first time in a long while. One evening, as Oluchi and Ada sat outside their hut, they watched the sunset together. Ada looked at her mother with admiration and love. Mama, you are the strongest person I know. Oluchi smiled and hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you, Ada. We have been through so much, but we have each other. And with love and kindness, we can overcome anything. After Mazi Okoro's departure, the village elders knew there was still more to be done to mend the broken relationships and heal the wounds inflicted by the unjust treatment of Oluchi and her daughter Ada. The elders decided to call a meeting in the village square to address the entire community. The next morning, the elders sent messages to every corner of the village, inviting all the villagers to the market square. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, people began to gather, curious and anxious about the reason for the meeting. When the square was filled, one of the elders, the old man with a kind face, stood up and addressed the crowd. My fellow villagers, we have gathered here today to right a wrong that has been done to one of our own. Oluchi and her daughter Ada have suffered greatly because of false accusation and the hatred of one man. But we must remember that we all share in the blame for how we treated them. There was a murmur of agreement and guilt among the villagers as they realized the truth of the elder's words. The elder continued, Mazi Okoro has confessed his sins and has been banished from our village. However, the pain and suffering that Oluchi and Ada endured cannot be erased so easily. We must come together to seek their forgiveness and to make amends. Oluchi, standing beside Ada, felt a wave of emotions wash over her as she listened to the elder. She could see the remorse in the faces of the villagers who had once scorned her. One by one, the villagers stepped forward, each asking for Oluchi's forgiveness. Tears streamed down their faces as they expressed their gratitude for believing the lies and for treating her and her daughter so harshly. Oluchi's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and compassion. She forgave each villager, knowing that this was the beginning of true healing. After everyone had spoken, the elder raised his hand for silence. We must do more than just apologize. We must show our support and appreciation for Oluchi and Ada. Let us come together to provide for them as they rebuild their lives. The villagers responded with enthusiasm and generosity. They contributed large sums of money each, giving what they could to help Oluchi. The elders organized the construction of a new house on Oluchi's father's land, ensuring it was a beautiful and sturdy home where she and Ada could live comfortably. As the days turned into weeks, the villagers worked tirelessly to build the new house. It was a grand and joyful project, symbolizing the community's collective effort to make amends when the house was finally completed. It stood as a testament to the power of forgiveness and unity. Oluchi's gratitude knew no bounds. She thanked the villagers with heartfelt words, and the community felt a deep sense of fulfillment and joy in having made things right. With the money that was collected, Oluchi started a large fabric business in the village market. Her shop quickly became popular, known for its beautiful fabrics and Oluchi's warm, friendly service. Her business flourished, bringing prosperity not only to her and Ada but also to the entire village. As people came from neighboring communities to buy her fabrics, Oluchi and Ada's life transformed dramatically. They no longer lived in fear or isolation. The new house became a home filled with laughter, love and hope. Ada grew into a confident and happy young woman, proud of her mother's strength and resilience. One evening, as the sun set and cast a glow over the village, Oluchi and Ada sat outside their beautiful new home. They watched the bustling market where Oluchi's fabric shop stood as a beacon of their hard work and perseverance. "Mama, our lives has changed so much," Ada said, her eyes shining with happiness. Oluchi smiled, hugging her daughter close. "Yes, Ada, it has. We have been through so many things, but we have come out stronger and happier. With the support of our community, we have built a new life filled with hope and love." The villagers continued to support Oluchi's business, and her reputation as a skilled and kind businesswoman spread far and wide. Oluchi and Ada lived happily, surrounded by a community that had learned the value of forgiveness, kindness, and unity. Their story became a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring others to seek forgiveness and make amends for past wrongs. And so, Oluchi and Ada lived happily ever after, and their future bright with endless possibilities. The most important lesson in this story is about how strong people can be even when things are very hard. Oluchi lost her husband and son, and her in-laws treated her badly. Her community ignored her, but she still wanted to take care of her daughter. She was brave and stood up against unfair treatment, even when people blamed her for things she didn't do and left her alone. This shows that staying hopeful and strong is very important. Oluchi's story teaches us to be kind, honest, and to always fight for our dignity and the well-being of our loved ones, no matter what happens. Once upon a time, in a small village called Iwu, there was a man named Nze. He lived happily with his beautiful wife Ure. Nze was not just any ordinary man. He was also the kingmaker of the kingdom. This meant he helped choose who would be the next king. Now, the current king of Iwu was King Ike. King Ike had promised Nze that his first son would marry the princess. This was a big deal because it meant Nze's son would become the future king of Iwu. Nze was thrilled by this promise, as it would also strengthen his friendship with the king. But there was a problem. Nze and Uri didn't have any children. This worried Nze a lot because he knew that if he didn't have a son, he couldn't fulfill the promise to the king. Without a son to marry the princess, their chances to become the royal family would vanish like smoke in the wind. Every day, Nze prayed to the gods, asking them to bless him and Uri with a child. He hoped and hoped, but still no child came. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, King Ike waited patiently for his wife to also conceive and bear the princess, so the promise would be fulfilled. He trusted Nze and believed that one day his promise would be fulfilled. As days passed, Nze became more and more anxious. He knew time was running out, and if he didn't have a son soon, everything would fall apart. One day, while Nze was sitting under a big tree, lost in his thoughts, a wise woman approached him. She was known in the village for her wisdom and insight. "What troubles you, Nze?" she asked kindly, noticing the sadness in his eyes. Nze sighed heavily and explained his predicament to the old woman. He told her about the promise he made to King Ike and how he feared he would never have a son to fulfill it. The wise old woman listened intently, nodding her head as she absorbed every word. Then, after a moment of silence, she spoke, her voice filled with wisdom. "Do not lose hope, Nze," she said gently. "The gods work in mysterious ways, and sometimes they test our patience before granting our wishes. Trust in them and trust in yourself. Everything will happen in its own time." Nze felt a glimmer of hope reignite within him as he listened to the wise old woman's words. Maybe she was right. Maybe he needed to have faith and be patient. From that day on, Nze continued to pray and hope for a child. But this time, he did so with renewed faith and confidence. Ure, his wife, was not just beautiful. She was also kind-hearted and always had a smile for everyone she met. Despite her own worries about not having a child, she remained supportive of her husband Nze in everything he did. One day, as Ure was on her way to the market, she noticed a young girl sitting by the roadside, her face streaked with tears. Ure approached her gently and asked why she was so sad. The girl, whose name was Amma, poured out her heart to Ure. She said she had no one in the world and felt utterly alone. She even spoke of wanting to end her life. Ure's heart went out to Amma, and without a second thought, she invited the girl to come home with her. When Nze saw his wife returning with a stranger, he was taken aback, but Ure explained everything to him, how she had met Amma and felt compelled to help her. Nze, though initially hesitant, trusted his wife's judgment and welcomed Amma into their home. Ure and Nze offered Amma food, shelter, and kindness, making her feel like part of their family. As days turned into weeks, Amma became like a daughter to Ure and Nze. She helped around the house, ran errands, and even shared stories of her own past with them. Ure, in particular, formed a special bond with Amma. She saw in the young girl a reflection of her own longing for a child. Ure prayed even more fervently to the gods, asking them to bless Amma with happiness and security. But amidst their newfound happiness, Nze couldn't shake off his worries about the promise he made to King Ike. He knew that without a son, their future as the royal family of Iwu was uncertain. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Nze voiced his concern to Ure. "What if we never have a child, my dear?" he asked, his voice heavy with worry. Ure took Nze's hand in hers and looked into his eyes with unwavering love. "We may not have a child of our own," she said softly, "but perhaps Amma is the answer to our prayers. She is meant to be the one to fulfill the promise to King Ike." Nze pondered Ure's words, realizing the truth in them. Perhaps their happiness and fulfillment lay not in blood relations, but in the bonds of love and friendship they shared with Amma. And so, with renewed hope and determination, Nze and Ure embraced the idea of Amma becoming their daughter in every sense of the word. One day, as Nze decided to take a walk to the village palm wine spot, it was a cozy place where villagers gathered to chat, laugh, and enjoy the sweet taste of palm wine. Nze hoped that being around his friends would help him forget about his worries for a while. When he arrived at the palm wine spot, Nze greeted his friends with a smile. They welcomed him warmly and invited him to join them. Nze ordered a jug of palm wine and started drinking. The sweet taste of the wine made him feel relaxed, and he began to forget about his troubles. As the day went on, Nze drank more and more palm wine. He laughed loudly at his friends' jokes and danced to the rhythm of the drums. But as the sun began to set, Nze realized that he had drunk too much. He stumbled as he tried to stand up and decided it was time to go home. With unsteady steps, Nze made his way back to his house. The village was quiet as the night fell, and the only sound was the rustling of the trees in the gentle breeze. Nze felt a bit dizzy, but he was determined to reach home safely. Finally, after what felt like hours, Nze arrived at his doorstep. When he entered his hut, he met Amma inside alone. Under the influence of his drunkenness, he forced himself on Amma. Despite Amma pleading and crying, Nze was paying no attention because he was too drunk, so he thought Amma was Ure, his wife. He finished and dozed off immediately. Amma sat on the wooden bed crying and hurting because it was her first time. In the middle of her confusion, Ure walked on them, confused why Nze and Amma would be on the same bed. She moved closer and immediately sensed what just happened. She was furious. In her rage, she pounced on Amma. The next day, Amma woke up with puffy eyes, crying all night. She felt a weight in her chest as she remembered the harsh words Ure had said to her. She knew she had to talk to Ure and explain what had happened. Amma found Ure sitting outside her hut, her face still stained with anger. Amma took a deep breath and approached her cautiously. "Nne," she said softly, "please listen to me. I know you are angry, but it wasn't my fault. I tried to stop your husband, but he was too strong for me." Ure looked at Amma with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "I understand, Amma," she replied, her voice still cold, "but you should have done more to protect yourself. You shouldn't have let him treat you like that." Just then, Nze came out of his house and overheard their conversation. He could see the tension between Ure and Amma. and he knew he had to intervene. Ure, please, he said, his voice pleading. Don't blame Amma for what happened. It was my fault. I was the one who drank too much and I acted foolishly. Amma tried to stop me, but I was too drunk to listen. Ure looked at Nze, her anger softening slightly. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and she knew he was telling the truth. Nze, she said, her voice gentle. I understand that you are ashamed of what happened, but that doesn't change the fact that Amma allowed herself to be used. She needs to learn to stand up for herself. Nze sighed, feeling a pang of guilt. He knew Ure was right, but he couldn't bear to see Amma suffer because of his impossibility. Please, Ure, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Don't punish Amma for my mistakes. She's a good girl, and she doesn't deserve to be treated this way. Ure looked at Nze for a long moment, considering his words. Finally, she let out a sigh and nodded. Fine, she said, her voice weary. Amma can stay, but she needs to understand that she can't let anyone mistreat her like that again. Amma breathed a sigh of relief, her eyes brimming with tears of gratitude. She knew she had been given a second chance, and she promised herself that she would never let anyone hurt her again. As the days passed, Amma worked hard to prove herself to Ure. She helped out around the house, cooked delicious meals, and tended to the garden with care. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild the trust that had been broken. And though the memory of the previous day still haunted her dreams, Amma knew that with love and support of her guardians, she would overcome any obstacle that came her way. After 2 weeks, Amma began to notice changes in her body. She felt nauseous in the mornings, and her clothes felt tighter than usual. At first, she didn't want to believe it, but deep down, she knew what it meant. Amma was pregnant. She was scared to tell Ure, her guardian, about her condition. She didn't know how Ure would react, and the thought of disappointing her filled Amma with dread. But Ure, with the keen eyes of an elder, noticed the changes in Amma's appearances. One day, as Amma was going about her chores, Ure called her over. Amma, she said, her voice serious, I've noticed that something is different about you. Have you been feeling unwell? Amma hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond, but then she remembered her words about standing up for herself. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. Yes, Nne, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I might be pregnant. Ure's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment she was speechless, but then her expression hardened, and she grabbed Amma by the arm. Come with me, she said, her voice cold and unforgiving. Confused and frightened, Amma allowed herself to be led away by Ure. They walked in silence to the village midwife's house, where Ure demanded that Amma be examined. The midwife, a wise old woman with a kind eyes, gently examined Amma and confirmed that they both already knew Amma was indeed pregnant. Ure's world came crashing down around her. She felt a mixture of anger, disappointment, and regret. She had taken Amma into her home, cared for her like a daughter, and this was how she repaid her? I can't believe this, Ure muttered, her voice trembling with emotion. I thought I was helping you, Amma. I thought you were a good girl, but now... Amma hung her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt ashamed and guilty for causing Ure so much pain. I'm sorry, Nne, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what to do. Uri sighed heavily, her anger giving way to sadness. She realized that no matter how angry she was, Amma was still just a young girl who needed guidance and support. I'm disappointed in you, Amma, she said, her voice softening slightly, but I won't abandon you. We'll figure this out together. And with those words, Uri made a solemn promise to herself and to Amma. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would stand by Amma's side and help her through this difficult time. As they walked back to the house, Uri put a comforting arm around Amma's shoulder, offering her silent reassurances. And though the road ahead was long and uncertain, they knew that as long as they had each other, they could face whatever came their way. After a long day at the palace, Nze returned home to find his wife Uri sitting in their hut, her face soaked with tears. Concerned, he rushed to her side and gently asked, Uri, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Uri looked up at him with red swollen eyes and shook her head. Oh, Nze, she sobbed. I feel like such a failure. For years, I've tried to give you the one thing you've always wanted, but I couldn't do it. And now, an outsider has come along and done it instead. Nze furrowed his brow in confusion, not understanding what Uri was trying to say. What do you mean, Uri? Why are you speaking in riddles? Uri took a deep breath and wiped away her tears. She knew she couldn't keep the truth from Nze any longer. Amma is pregnant, she said softly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. I just confirmed it with the midwife. Nze's heart skipped a beat at the news. He felt a rush of emotion, joy, excitement, but also guilt and remorse. He had always wanted to be a father, but he never imagined it would happen like this, with another woman. Trying to hide his true feelings, Nze pretended to be remorseful. Oh, Uri, he said, his voice heavy with fake regret. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Please forgive me. Uri looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching for his face for any sign of sincerity. Finally, she nodded. I forgive you, Nze, she said quietly, but right now, I need some time alone to process everything. Nze nodded understandingly, though inside, he couldn't shake the feeling of excitement at the prospect of becoming a father. Of course, Uri, he said, forcing himself to sound contrite. Take all the time you need. I'll be here if you need me. With that, Nze left Uri alone in their hut and stepped outside into the cool evening air. He felt a whirlwind of emotions swelling inside him. Joy, guilt, anticipation. He even had to tread carefully around Uri, not wanting to upset her further. But deep down, Nze couldn't help but feel grateful for the news of Amma's pregnancy. After years of longing for a child of his own, it seemed that his prayers had been finally answered. And though the circumstances were far from ideal, Nze was determined to do everything in his power to support Amma and their unborn child. As he gazed up at the stars twinkling in the night sky, Nze made a silent vow to himself. He would be the best father he could be, no matter what challenges lay ahead. And with that thought in his heart, he felt a glimmer of hope for the future. As days passed, Nze remained by Uri's side, offering her comfort and support during her moments of sadness and confusion. He also made sure to provide whatever Amma needed to be comfortable during her pregnancy, knowing that it was his responsibility to take care of both women in his life. However, about 2 months after Amma's pregnancy was confirmed, Uri suddenly fell very ill. Nze was thrilled at the thought of losing her, he realized how much he truly loved Uri and regretted all the pain he had caused her over the years. In a panic, they called for the village herbalist, hoping that he could help Uri recover. The herbalist examined Uri closely, his brow furrowed in concern. After thorough examination, he turned to Nze and said, "I need you to call the midwife. We need her expertise in this matter." Nze nodded and quickly went to fetch the midwife. When she arrived, she wasted no time in examining Uri. After a few tense moments, she announced, "Uri is pregnant," the midwife said, her voice filled with surprise. Nze felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Uri, who had been unable to conceive for so many years, was now carrying a child. Overwhelmed with emotion, Nze sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and joy wash over him. Thank you, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "The gods have truly blessed us." Uri looked at Nze with wide eyes, stunned by his reactions. He had expected him to be angry or upset, but instead, he was filled with nothing but joy and gratitude. As the news sank in, Nze realized that this was a second chance for him and Uri, a chance to make things right and start anew. He vowed to cherish Uri and their unborn child with all his heart, never taking them for granted again. With renewed hope and determination, Nze helped Uri back to their hut, where they would await the arrival of their long-awaited miracle. And as they held each other close, surrounded by the love and support of their village, they knew that no matter what challenges that lay ahead, they would face them together as a family. As time passed and Uri's pregnancy progressed, Amma's behavior began to change. She became jealous and resentful towards Uri, feeling threatened by the love and attention Nze was showing his wife. Amma wanted to be the only one cherished by Nze, and she couldn't stand the thought of sharing his affections with another woman. Amma's jealousy manifested in her actions and words. She would parade herself around the village, boasting about being the first to get pregnant and flaunting her growing belly for all to see. Whenever Nze showed Uri any kindness or affection, Amma would get so angry and make evil remarks, trying to undermine their relationship. Uri couldn't believe that Amma, who had once been like a daughter to her, could turn into such a terrible person. She had welcomed Amma into their home with open arms, only to be met with hostility and disrespect. At first, Uri tried to ignore Amma's behavior, hoping that she would eventually come to her senses. But as Amma's rudeness and jealousy continued to escalate, Uri found it harder and harder to keep her temper in check. One day, as Uri was sitting outside their hut, trying to enjoy a moment of peace, Amma approached her with a smug look on her face. "You know, Uri," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "I never thought I'd see the day when you would be the one left behind. Looks like I beat you to it after all." Uri felt a surge of anger rising inside her, but she forced herself to remain calm. She knew that stooping to Amma's level would only make things worse. "Amma," she said finally, "this jealousy and rudeness towards me and Nze needs to stop. We are all part of the same family now, and we should be supporting each other, not tearing each other down." But Amma just laughed scornfully. "Support each other?" she scoffed. "Why should I support you when you've been the reason Nze never paid any attention to me? You are just an old barren woman who doesn't deserve him. Ure's heart sank at Amma's cruel words. She had hoped that they could find a way to coexist peacefully, but it seemed that Amma's resentment ran deeper than she had realized. Still, Uri refused to give up hope. She knew that with patience and understanding, they could overcome this hurdle and find a way to rebuild their fractured relationship. As she watched Amma walk away, Uri made a silent vow to herself. She would not let any of Amma's jealousy and bitterness poison their family any longer. She would continue to show kindness and compassion towards Amma, in the hopes that one day she would see the error of her ways and come back to them with an open heart. As the days passed, Amma's time came and she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. Nze was overjoyed at the arrival of his son. He thanked the gods for their blessings and felt his heart swell with pride at the thought of finally having an heir to carry on his legacy. When Amma returned to her hut with her newborn son, Ure went to celebrate with her. She wanted to share in the joy of the new addition to their family and offer her congratulations to Amma. But as Ure approached Amma's hut, she was met with a cold and hostile reception. Amma glared at her with disdain and spat out hurtful words. "You," she sneered, "you shouldn't touch the hair of Nze with your fetish hand. You are nothing but a barren old woman who doesn't deserve to be near him." Ure felt like she had been slapped in the face. She couldn't believe the venomous words that were coming out of Amma's mouth. She had always tried to be kind and supportive towards Amma, but now she was being treated with nothing but contempt. Hurt and confused, Ure turned to look at Nze, hoping for some kind of support or intervention. But to her dismay, Nze bowed his head in silence, unwilling to confront Amma for fear of upsetting her. Ure felt a pang of disappointment and betrayal. She had hoped that Nze would stand by her side and defend her against Amma's cruelty, but it seemed that his desire for a male heir had clouded his judgment and made him blind to the pain of his wife. With tears in her eyes, Ure turned and walked away from Amma's hut, her heart heavy with sorrow. She couldn't bear to stay and subject herself to any more of Amma's insults. She felt alone and abandoned by the man she loved, and it tore her apart inside. As she wandered through the village, Ure couldn't shake the feeling of sadness and betrayal that weighed heavily on her heart. She wondered how things had come to this, how the joy of welcoming a new life into their family had been overshadowed by bitterness and resentment. But despite the pain she was feeling, Ure refused to give up hope. She knew that with time and patience, they could overcome these obstacles and find a new way to heal their fractured family. And with that thought in her heart, she dried her tears and vowed to stay strong for the sake of her marriage and her unborn child. After some months had passed since Amma gave birth to her son, it was now Ure's turn. She too gave birth to a baby boy. Much to the joy and excitement of Nze, he couldn't contain his happiness at the thought of having another son to carry on his name and legacy. But while Nze celebrated the arrival of his second son, Amma was filled with anger and jealousy. She had hoped that Ure would give birth to a girl, believing that it would make her the sole focus of Nze's attention and affection. Amma felt threatened by Ure's presence and the fact that she had also given birth to a son. Meanwhile, Ure was overflowing with gratitude towards the gods for blessing her with a child. She had hoped that the birth of her son would solidify her position as Nze's rightful wife and her son as a true heir to their family's legacy. However, her hopes were shattered when Nze made it clear that Ikenna, Amma's son, was his first child and therefore the rightful heir. Ure's heart broke at his words. She had thought that being Nze's legitimate wife would guarantee her son's status as the heir, but now she realized that it wasn't so simple. From that moment on, Ure began to see Amma as her rival. She felt like she was constantly competing with her for Nze's love and affection, and it tore her apart inside. She couldn't understand why Nze couldn't see the value in their son, why he insisted on favoring Amma and her child over them. Despite her pain and disappointment, Ure remained strong for the sake of her child. She knew that she had to protect them and ensure that they had a bright future ahead of them, even if it meant facing challenges and obstacles along the way. As she cradled her newborn son in her arms, Ure made a silent vow to herself. She would do whatever it took to ensure that her son had the best possible life, even if it meant standing up to Amma and Nze and fighting for what she believed was right. And with that determination burning bright in her heart, Ure held her son close, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead as she navigated the complex dynamics of her family's relationships. After the birth of Nze's sons, the king began to worry because his wife had not yet conceived. He was concerned about the promise he had made to Nze, and he feared that he would not be able to fulfill it. But as fate would have it, 4 years after Ike and Obi were born, the queen finally became pregnant. The king was overjoyed at the news and thanked the gods for their blessings. He had always wanted a daughter, and now his wish was finally coming true. As the months went by, the queen's belly swelled with the new life growing inside her, and finally, one beautiful day, she gave birth to a very lovely girl. The king named her Ako, just as he had always envisioned. Ako grew up to be a sweet and charming girl, beloved by all who knew her. She had a bright smile and a kind heart, and she brought joy and happiness wherever she went. Meanwhile, Obi and Ako became close friends. They had a special spot where they would sit and catch up, sharing stories and laughter as they enjoyed each other's company. Obi was lively and accommodating, always eager to make everyone around him happy. However, Ikenna was the complete opposite of his brother. He was always cold and withdrawn towards people, his demeanor shaped by the resentment and bitterness that Amma had instilled in him over the years. One bright morning, after so many years of silence, Amma woke up and approached Nze with an unusual request. She informed him that she was planning to visit her village to let her father's relatives know that she was safe and well. Without waiting for Nze's response, she took Ikenna with her and set off on her journey. Nze watched them go with a heavy heart, feeling a sense of relief mixed with sadness at the thought of Ikenna leaving. He knew that things had not been easy between them, but he couldn't help but worry about his son's future without him by his side. As Amma and Ikenna disappeared into the distance, Nze couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Obinna and Akonna were getting closer each day. Obinna would often tease Akonna in a playful manner. He would joke around, saying things like, "Behave, Akonna, because you are my elder brother's wife." Akonna would laugh it off most times, but deep down, his words would sting a little. One day, when Obinna teased Akonna as usual, she responded with a hint of sadness in her voice, saying,
I don't think I would like to marry someone who is a sadist like Ike. Obina brushed off her comments, saying, "You have no choice. Akonna, whether you like it or not, you will always be my sister-in-law." Akonna's heart sank at his words. She had developed feeling for Obinna over time, and she knew he felt the same way about her, but their love seemed doomed from the start, given their family circumstances. As days passed, Akonna couldn't shake off the sadness that lingered within her. She longed for a future where she could be with Obinna, but she knew it was impossible as long as she was married to his elder brother. Meanwhile, Amma had her own plans in mind. She knew that if Ikenna married the princess, he would automatically become the king, and so she was focused on securing the throne for her son, even if it meant taking him away from his family forever. Despite Amma's scheming, Ikenna couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that lingered within him. He missed his family and longed to be reunited with them, but he also knew that his destiny was tied to the throne, and he couldn't turn his back on his duty. As the days turned into weeks, tensions continued to rise within the royal family. Akonna's feelings for Obinna grew stronger with each passing day, but she knew that their love could never be. And as Amma's plans unfolded, threatening to tear the family apart, Akonna and Obinna found themselves facing an impossible choice. Ure noticed how close Obi and Ako were becoming, and she couldn't help but feel hopeful that their bond might blossom into something more. She tried to gently persuade Obinna to propose to the princess, despite her betrothal to Ike, hoping that true love would prevail. But Obi remained steadfast in his decision. He told his mother that he couldn't bring himself to betray his friend and desire someone else's property. Ure felt disappointed by his refusal, but she also felt a sense of pride knowing that Obi was acting with integrity and honor. Meanwhile, Amma returned from her journey, feeling confident that she had prepared her son to marry the princess. Little did she know that Ike, her son, had fallen head over heels for a girl he had recently met in her village. On their return, Nze informed Ike that it was time to finalize his marriage with Ako. Ike was initially skeptical about the arrangement, but a warning look from his mother made him reluctantly accept. The next day, Ike visited Ako to discuss their impending marriage. Their meeting was awkward and uninteresting, leaving Ako feeling unsettled. She pleaded with Ike to reject her, confessing that she didn't love him but rather had feelings for Obi. Ike was taken aback by Ako's confession. He had never realized the depth of their friendship and the feeling they harbored for each other. Feeling conflicted, he returned home and shared the news with his mother. Amma's reaction was expected. She dashed to Ure's hut, warned her to tell her son to leave the princess alone, else head will roll. With that, she left the hut, thinking of her next line of action. On the day of the marriage, Amma and Ike arrived at the palace dressed in their finest attire. Amma couldn't contain her excitement at the thought of becoming the mother of the king of Iwu. Ore and Obi were also present, each with their own thoughts and emotions swelling inside them. As everyone took their seats, Ike suddenly raised his hand, indicating that he had something important to say. The king granted him permission to speak, and Ike stood up nervously. He greeted the king respectfully and then proceeded to making a shocking announcement. "I'm sorry, your majesty," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "but I cannot go through with this marriage to the princess. I am in love with someone else, and I believe it would be dishonest and unfair to marry her when my heart belongs to another." Amma was taken aback by Ike's words. She had never expected him to betray her plans like this. She opened her mouth to protest, but Nze silenced her with a stern look, indicating that he wanted to hear what Ike had to say. Obi and Ako watched in surprise and excitement as Ike confessed his love for someone else. Ako's heart skipped a beat as she realized that Ike's feelings were mutual, and she silently thanked the gods for this unexpected turn of events. Ure felt a surge of gratitude and relief washed over her. She had prayed for this day to come, and now it seemed that her prayers had been answered. She knew that Ike's decision would bring joy and happiness to both him and Ako, and she couldn't be happier for them. As Ike finished speaking, there was a moment of stunned silence in the room. But then, the king spoke up, his voice filled with understanding and compassion. "I respect your decision, Ike," he said kindly. "Love is a powerful force, and it cannot be ignored or denied. I release you from your betrothal to the princess, and I wish you and your beloved all the happiness in the world." With those words, the tension in the room dissolved, and a sense of peace and contentment settled over everyone present. As Ike and Ako embraced each other, they knew that they had made the right choice, and their love would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. After Ike's bold declaration at the palace, Amma stormed out in disappointment and tears. She was devastated by the turn of events, feeling as though her carefully laid plans had crumbled before her eyes. But despite her sorrow, life continued on. Ako and Obi, now free to pursue their love, were married in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by their family and friends. The kingdom rejoiced at their union, knowing that their love would bring prosperity and happiness to all. As time passed, Ako and Obi ruled the kingdom with wisdom and tranquility. They worked tirelessly to ensure the well-being of their people, and their reign was marked by peace and prosperity. And then, 1 year after their marriage, the gods blessed them with a set of twins, a boy and a girl. The kingdom celebrated the arrival of the royal heirs with the great joy and excitement, knowing that their future was secure in the hands of such loving and capable rulers. As the years went by, Ako and Obi continued to lead their kingdom with grace and compassion. They raised their children with love and kindness, instilling in them the values of honesty, integrity, and empathy. And so, the story of Ako, Obi, and their kingdom comes to a happy ending. They lived happily ever after, their legacy of love and leadership remembered for generations to come. And as the sun set on their kingdom, the people rejoiced in the knowledge that their future was bright and full of promise. The most important lesson in this story is that we should avoid harming those who have supported us, believing we will escape consequences, as actions often have repercussions that eventually reach us. Additionally, the story teaches us that genuine love and honesty prevail over deceit and manipulations. With that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures, where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, share, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.